Hey everyone, A Thorn for your heart here. Today I am going to demonstrate another outfit creation. I am going to move at a much faster pace this time, less explanation, just kind of show you my process of how I do this. Today we're just going to take this armor you're looking at, or this outfit you're looking at from Darkness Rises. I believe it's the Patriot outfit, and we're going to put it into Neverwinter Nights 2 using Blender, using the same method we used with the first armor creation, outfit creation tutorial that I made just the other day. So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to focus so much on the textures, not so focus so much on explaining every small bit. Rather, I'm just going to go through the process myself at a little bit less than real-time speed, just so that I'm not moving too fast and getting it done. So hopefully this tutorial will not be an hour and a half. Hopefully it'll be wrapped up in 30 minutes or less. So with that being said, let's go ahead and begin. So first thing I want to do is I have this blend file open. I've extracted a few of the armors outfits and I put them here. There's a few of them that I saw, a few that I wanted to work with, and a few that I decided not to. As you can see, something like that, BB bulky. There's some other armors I've taken from here. But I'm gonna go ahead and do this one simply because it's simple, it's easy, and it can get the explanation done quickly, and we can get more done with it than say an armor that's really intricate. So that being said, let's begin again. So let's see. First thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and clean up my armor, my outfit, as I prep it for converting over. So I'm gonna switch over to face mode. I'm gonna go from vertex select to face select, and I'm gonna go ahead and hover over the hands. Usually when they create these models, they make them in groups already, so it's easier to select. I'm just hovering over and I'm pressing L, and L is letting me select by link, and it's kind of linking them. I believe it's linking them by the weights themselves. So I'm just pressing L and just getting rid. I'm gonna get rid of those hands because we don't need hands. Getting rid of that. And if you have any strays like this left over, I'm just pressing Z, going into wireframe mode. I'm gonna hold down Control, left click, left mouse, and highlight that. Control, left mouse. I'm gonna highlight that. I'm gonna press Control and number pad 1 to go back to this view. I'm gonna press X, and then I'm going to delete the vertices. Okay. Now for this tutorial, I am gonna leave the boots on. But ultimately, what I like to do is I like to take the boots off, and I want to export the boots as a boot model themselves for another tutorial. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm also going to be removing the sword separately, and I'm going to reattach it in the end, and you'll see why I'm doing that. I'm also noticing there's some merging doubles here. As you can see, there's some faces that are really close to each other. And so that can cause an issue in the game where you get this little glitch-like issue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the front faces. I'm just going to pull them out a little bit. Actually, those are the back faces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push them in a little bit. All that is if we look through, we pretty much have two faces. And I'm starting to think we don't actually need these faces because there's really no way for the engine to ever take a peek at what's inside here and what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those. But normally if you have faces like this, you just want to kind of shrink them down. You can press S for scale and just bring them in. What this basically means is there are faces, the texture, there are two copies of that texture. One of them is facing outward and one of them is facing inward, simply because the game shouldn't be able to render faces in double-sided textures. So it has to recreate. What you do is you reclone the texture, and or you duplicate the texture, and you have the faces facing inside as well, which is why we're able to look inside here and see the faces. Now I'm going to delete those because there's no need for it. I'm just going to delete them. Now if you turn on back face culling, it's going to show when the game when you get at this angle, it's going to look like it's see-through. You may have seen that in some models. I don't think it's a big issue. If anything, it's probably saving us some space on the model and some polygons. So we're just gonna go ahead and leave it like that. That looks good to me. I'll go ahead and pull out the sword when I get to the next scene. So I'm gonna go ahead and save it by pressing Control S, saving my blend file. And then I already have another blend file opened up here. If you're following along and you have your own outfit, just create a new blend file, import your. I used the Jester's Nude model. I cleaned it up a little bit. I took off the hands and the feet, and I cleaned it up. I think I have this blend file up on my first outfit tutorial. If you need this exact this model on as I said, thanks to Jester and for his new model. And yeah, okay, so that being done, let's go ahead and go into our skeleton. Let's click here and go into data options. Turn off names. All right, and I'm also going to duplicate the skeleton because I know this process already. I'm going to need it eventually. I'm going to turn off the main skeleton. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and append that armor, that outfit from my last the one I just saved. I have it saved here in the Darkness Rises, and I went to, you just find that blend file you're pulling from. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it from this Darkness Rises, which of course, as I stated, is this blend file. And I'm gonna append it. I'm gonna pull out an object. I'm gonna find that object, which I believe was called Male Sword Body Patriot. So now that I brought that in, I'm gonna go ahead and line it up. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna scale it up a little bit. Let's see, maybe I'm holding down Control and Shift too. If I hold down Control, you move in increments, but if you hold down Control Shift, you move in smaller increments. So Control and Shift, and I'm moving in. Oops, I'm sorry. Scale, Control Shift, and I think about right there is good. Like 0.106. I'm gonna press 3 to turn it over to its right side, and I'm gonna press Grab, and I'm gonna press Y, and I'm gonna bring it in a little bit. And I want to line it up, and I'm trying to line it up by the legs, and then I'm looking at the legs first, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the top. Usually it's easier to move the top than it is the legs, I find. In this case, I'm seeing it's a little bit off, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press R for rotate, and I'm going to kind of bring it, let's see, forward? No, I'm going to bring it back a little bit, and this should help me just grab it by the arrow instead of pressing grab, and I'm just gonna kind of line it up so that way it's fitting a little bit better. Looks good right there. Anything else we can fix in the final edit. You might get some clipping, we may not, we'll see. No, it looks like I'm on board. All right, so now that that's done, I've already set my model to begin transferring from this mesh onto this mesh, the data and the vertex groups, the muscles, the weights. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna turn back on that skeleton, or actually it was already on. I'm just gonna rename it to Move Me. Okay, and this is just for, usually I don't rename it, I'm just doing it so that way in case anybody's following along. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on X-ray. All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and expand this. Well, it's already expanded. If you're not expanded, you can either click pose here to go into pose mode, or if you're not familiar with that, you can simply go down here and click pose mode. Okay, now that I have that done, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line up this mesh with my mesh on top. So I'm going to click this bone right here. I believe that's arm 3. It could be wrong. That doesn't be important. I'm gonna hit R for rotate. I'm gonna hold down Control, and oops, I have to first let the engine know that this mesh will be tied down to the Move Me skeleton. So, all right, now that I've done that, I'm gonna go to Move Me. I'm gonna click here. I'm gonna press R for rotate. I'm gonna hold down Control, 1, 2, 3. I'm just gonna be very rough with this. I'm gonna say 15. If we look on the bottom left, we see how much we're moving. Bottom left screen, 5, 10, 15. I wanna make sure that every movement I make is replicated on the other side. And let's see, for the sake of the legs, let's go maybe 5. No, 2, I'm sorry. So I'm holding down Control Shift as I stated, because if you just hold down Control, you'll go in increments of 5. Holding down Control Shift, you go in increments of 1. Now, if you choose not to, you can always move it like this, but just be sure to copy down that same number, like in the bottom left corner it says 0.36, to apply that to the other leg, the other bone that's that relates to this one. Okay, so I'm hitting rotate, Control Shift, 1, 2. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna leave it as is. Now, normally, as I said in the last outfit, I'd write down the numbers, but that's fairly easy to remember. These go out 15, these go in 2. All right, so out 15, out 2, and then when we come back in, we'll bring it in 15, bring it back in 2, and that'll help us line up to the regular bone that we duplicated from, and keeping that here for reference. All right, so now that that's done, I'm gonna go into the body, the mesh, the under mesh, and I'm gonna click apply. That means that I applied those bone changes to the mesh, and now the mesh is no longer needed. it's no longer needed in the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off just for the view purposes. I'm not going to delete it because we're going to need it when we come back. Okay, so that being done, let's go ahead and let's prepare to transfer our weights. I'm going to turn off, delete that original skeleton that it came with from the actual game that it was ripped from. I'm going to go ahead and delete all the groups of this model, because some models you have won't have any groups. And what I'm also going to do is now I'm going to go ahead and turn off that bottom layer so it's not confusing me, and I'm going to cut out this sword. The reason being is I don't want the sword weights to transfer to the body because it's going to transfer awkwardly. Considering a sword is not it's not fluid, it's going to make it transfer as if it would. Meaning, so if this leg moved, the sword, if this part of the leg moves, this sword will move with it, and it's going to make the sword look like it's a rubber sword. And last I checked, you're not looking like a warrior for walking around with a rubber sword. Rather, you're more of a town fool, and I don't believe that's a playable class. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight everything. I'm pressing Alt and I'm holding Alt and left clicking as I'm going through. Alt, left click, and okay, I'm just gonna see what. Okay, that's it. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna just press P for separate or part, okay? And it's gonna say, what do you want to separate? Do you want to separate by the selection, by the material, or by loose parts? More often than not, it's usually the selection. We won't be using these if ever, unless you're doing placeables and stuff like that. But for the most part, selection works. So I'm gonna separate this by selection. And what it's gonna do is it's created another object right underneath it, and it's called Male Sword Body Patriot 001. And that's just the sword by itself. Now we turn off the sword, we have this, simply because we are going to weight that sword manually. And there's a reason why I'm doing that in this, is because sometimes you may grab stuff that you may want to do this with, and you're converting your own outfits that you don't want to automatically transfer weights from. And you'll see why that is toward the end. So now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and turn back on the underbody. And as you can see, it has all of its weights here. I'm going to press Control Tab to go into weight mode. If not, you can always go into weight mode. And I'm going to press Z to go into scale, into wireframe. And then I'm showing you here just the weights that are on the Jester's model. Okay, so I'm pressing Z to undo that. Control Tab to go back into object mode. And go into, actually I'm going to stay in solid mode. Okay, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to prep this to have weights transferred onto it. So that being done, I'm going to add a data transfer under modifiers. I'm going to hit vertex groups. I'm going to select vertex groups here under vertex data. I'm going to select nearest face interpolated as I did in my last tutorial. I'm also going to click PHHM NK body 02, which is the body we are going to copy those weights from onto our new one. And I'm going to put generate. Now in order to see that, I can go into weight mode, weight paint, or you can press Control Tab and then press Z to go into wireframe, and let's just go ahead and do a quick check. Looks like most things transferred okay. Just by my experience, I can tell right now that this is going to be okay. We might have a problem here with some stretching with this little part right here, particularly when the arm moves. It looks like this may pull. It's going to pull this part of the mesh with the arm. We can fix that afterward. That's a quick fix. What I want to do is I want to tie this particular part only to the ribs and not to the arm. But we can't fix that right here. Even if I tried painting it, it won't let me fix it simply because I haven't applied the modifier. So I'm going to press Control 1, go back into that mode. Okay, I'm going to press Apply now. Now that it's applied, I can go ahead and color those weights in, and I can move stuff around, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I'll do that at the very end. That's the last thing I do. Usually I don't do it until I've already had everything else done. Then it's pretty much a cleanup from there on out. So that's done. I'm going to go press Z again to jump out of wireframe mode. I'm going to press Control Tab to go back into object mode, or you can do the same thing down here. Just go into solid and then go into object mode. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off that underlayer because we no longer need it. It served its purpose. Now that that's been done, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I can turn on the sword, though we're not weighting it yet as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the under skeleton, the one that we had previously saved. I'm going to turn on the over skeleton called Move Me. and because we're going to use this skeleton to tell our mesh to go back into this position. To do that first, we must rest the pose. Now, in my first tutorial, I think I briefly explained this. You want to rest the pose and zero it out. Zeroing it out lets us know that any new modifications that we make to the pose from here on out will apply to whatever we tie to it, in this case our new mesh. So we're going to apply the pose, apply the rest. Now that it's rested, we zeroed it out. So we'll go ahead and go back to our male mesh, and we'll now tie our new muscles, as I call them, vertex groups. We're going to tie these groups to this bone, so this bone and these groups can talk to each other and move around. So that being done, I'm going to go ahead and choose an armature. I'm going to choose the Move Me armature, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to go to Move Me, okay, and I'm going to turn on pose mode, okay, and if I remember correctly, this moved 15, so I'm going to move back in 15. 1, 2, 3. Oops, 3, 15. Okay, now it's a little off. We'll fix that in a bit. Okay, 1, 2, 3. 15, and these moved in 2, so Control Shift 1, 2, and this one Control Shift 1, 2. There we go. Alright, looks good. Now, even though this bone isn't aligned properly, it doesn't matter as long as it's within the area. It gets it right. So don't worry if you don't line up your bone or your mesh properly, the under mesh. As long as it's within that same ballpark, and I don't mean to say as long as it's within the same house, in relation to ballpark, you should be fine. In this case, this is fine. Okay, and if you have trouble using this mode and it's getting too distracting, you can always, in the Move Me tab, go into the data options here, and you can turn on stick mode. I use this sometimes whenever I'm using 2 X-ray modes, like in this case if I'm using X-ray on the underskeleton and I'm using stick mode, it'll help me see underneath, and so to speak. So okay, so I'm gonna turn that off, and I apologize if I'm speaking real fast. I'm trying to make this tutorial quick and simple, and I don't know if I'm doing it, but I know someone mentioned my tutorial being an hour and a half long, and it's like, yikes. So I'm trying to make this go by as soon as I can, hopefully get it across, and hopefully this meshes with the other tutorial, and to say, hey, I may not have understood it there, but I understand it here. Okay, so moving on, I am going to go ahead and let's see. Now, if I'm looking at this underskeleton, I'm noticing just right off the bat that this wrist isn't lined up, centered within this actual underskeleton, and that's this one right here. So I'm going to turn this one off so we can see, just like this. I want to get this centered on here, and that's easy. All we got to do is turn this one back on. It's in stick mode now. If you're in the orchestral mode, you can go to stick mode. I'm gonna go to do that, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this bone, and I'm gonna grab this bone. I'm gonna press 3 to turn it sideways, and I'm just gonna hit R for rotate and just kind of bring it in to it's about centered up, about right there. Okay. Now, and then I'm gonna press Control 1, go into the front view. Now, when I'm working front view, I want to make sure I select only one, because if I select both again, and obviously if I hit rotate, they're moving together, and he's doing the dance, the cha-cha. So let's go ahead and select one. Go ahead and hit rotate, and I'm gonna hit Control Shift and just move it 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. If I can get one more, it's just sometimes it's tricky. Okay, try that again. I'm gonna go 5 and just go back 1. Yeah, 4 works. So I'm going to do 4 here on this side too. 1, and then bring it back 1, 4, and that works. So we're pretty much we're good. We're gold now. So we've used that skeleton, that armature, to pretty much deform our new mesh into place. And once we're happy with it, we're going to click apply on the mesh. It's saying apply all the stuff that Move Me did to you, and we did that. And we can go and turn off this mesh. We don't need it right now anymore. We can turn this bottom one on. Oh, actually, we can delete this now. We no longer need it. And actually, we don't even need the bottom movement anymore, so we're gonna clean that up as well. Okay, so we're pretty much ready to export from here on out, except that the sword isn't weighted down properly. Now, the reason why I did that is because I like the sword to be weighted down to one bone only, because then it's more realistic. You can't really have a sword swinging whenever the leg moves, the sword moves with it. That's just really weird. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna tie this sword down as I turn on X-ray for the bones to one of the bones on the side. Now, normally I used to do pelvis. It all matters. I tie it down to the pelvis, so when the pelvis moves, the sword moves with it, and usually that helps it stay in place. If you've seen my backpack tutorial, you'll understand what I mean when you place a backpack on the model and you tie it to the ribs bone. Whenever the ribs move, the backpack moves. Well, in this case, the sword is more closer to the pelvis, and it makes more sense to have it on the pelvis, because when the hips move and the weight from the hips push and pull, it'll push and pull on the sword, and there's really no animation within the game itself that allows the pelvis to be fluid, so to speak. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to simply press Control to go into edit mode. I'm going to press A to select all of my vertices, and then I'm going to go to my vertex group. I'm going to add a vertex here. I'm going to name it based off what it's named on the skeleton, which is called pelvis. Okay, and I'm going to click assign. So now all of these vertex are assigned to the pelvis group. All right, and if I want to see what that's like, I just go into weight mode and see how they're all assigned. Red means they're assigned, so they're purely 100% assigned to the pelvis. I'm going to jump out of that now. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these two parts back together again now. Now, as long as there's a pelvis bone in here on this mesh. Okay, let's get to it. There's the pelvis bone for the actual mesh. Now, what happens here is if you have two bones, if you're merging two objects together, so long as the bone names are the same, the weights will merge with that bone. So I won't have two versions of pelvis. Instead, I will have, as I combine them, I'm clicking this one, and I'm going to shift select this one. Now, when I combine them, I'll have one pelvis bone with both those weights merged together under one unified name. So I'm going to hit Control J to join them together, and they should automatically within here merge. Okay, and now when I go back into weights, we'll see that my pelvis has all the weights selected. So that should work as far as I've tested before in the past with animations. You don't need a sword. I tend to think this armor, this outfit uses a sword simply for the look. It's more of a cosmetic thing. I don't see anybody rushing about in battle with this outfit on unless you're, you know, playing a Napoleon type character. So we're pretty much done from here on out. Let's see. We've got all of that. I'm gonna go ahead and do my checks now. I'm going to turn this off X-ray. We don't need it on here no more. And I'm just gonna do what I always do. My 3 checks, and my 3 checks are I'm gonna make sure first my outfit is named properly. So I'm gonna name it P underscore HHM underscore CL for cloth underscore body 01. Before I press enter, I'm going to press Control A, Control C, and I'm going to work my way down the line. Now, because I usually work from left to right. In this case, it's faster if I work from right to left because I already copied this. So I might as well just sit here and paste it in there. Paste it in there. I'm going to add my armature modifier. Now I'm going to copy that and paste it in there. Okay. My texture should already be set. I did my texturing ahead of time because, like I said, I wanted to make this video fast. I already prepped all my textures ahead of time in the override. So all this thing needs is the MDB to meet me in the override with the textures. That's all done. So I'll do my checks one more time. Armature, does it match? Or does it have an armature? Yes, it does. It has the human skeleton armature. The mesh, does the mesh match the object? Yes, it does. The names match, therefore the engine will read it. Does the material match the object? Yes, the material matches the object, therefore the engine will read it. Okay? Now, Textures, that's its own story, its own thing. My texture is already preset. If your textures for some reason you're pulling in a model of your own and they don't match and they show up wacky, you can always use the MDB cloner to reassign the textures yourself by just opening up that file and then just selecting them and then rewriting it. That helped me when I first started learning, because this was sometimes would get confusing if you had these in the wrong slots. Sometimes it would place the normal map in the glow map area and the diffuse and the tint. So if you're still confused about these textures, you can always just take them out if you want and just reassign them after you save out the MDB model. Okay. So that's done. I'm going to go ahead and copy this name because I'm going to use it when I export. File, export, Neverwinter Nights II, Smooth TS Scenes. I'm going to choose Alpha Test as I do with most of my outfits. I'm going to go to my override. I'm going to go to where I have my outfit. I have it under demo, and I believe I have it under patriot outfit. I'm going to hit Control V to paste that name there. I'm going to press export and let that export. Now that that's exported, I'm going to go ahead and start up the game. And everything should appear to work. I'm doing this live. I didn't go ahead and pre-test anything. So if we run into some weird results, we'll work our way through them, okay? So here we go. New game, I'm going to select new module. It's just the quickest way to get into the character creation screen. Okay, I'm going to create a character. I'm going to choose human. And there's our model. Now, as we can see, the boots are overriding the vanilla boots simply because we exported this model as a whole. Normally, models, the body models would cut off at the boots and you make the boots separate. Now, the only reason I haven't done that is simply because I'm going to do that now. I'm going to cut off these boots and pull this leg down. That'll be our final edit. Our weights seem to be doing okay. I'm not going to get heavy into weights right now simply because going in here and fixing this little thing, we'd have to go in game and test it, and I don't want this to be a long tutorial. So I'm going to cut off these boots right now, and we can save that later. We can export those boots out. And just to be safe, I like the way they're looking just as is. Maybe shrink them down a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Load. I'm going to load up that MDB right now, and I'm going to make a clone of it. I'm going to call it Boots. And the reason I'm doing that is just to remind myself later to go back into this cloned MDB and just delete everything but the boots, okay? And that's what I'll use for my tutorial for my boots that I'll be making soon. So I'm going to save that clone out. Good to go. And then within this actual MDB here, I'm going to stay within it because I already have it open here. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to trim off the boots now, and I'm going to bring this down. But other than that, it looks fairly good. The neck seems to be fitting. If you need to pull out the neck, you can always do that by just putting it to its side, selecting these vertices, turning on proportional editing. Make a a big sphere of influence about right there and just yank on it just a little bit and it'll pull it open a little bit for you. If you don't know how to do that, you can watch some other tutorials, and I explained that a few times on some of the creations. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back into the actual model. I'm going to press Z twice to reset it from wireframe into solid. Okay, and then I'm going to go into face mode, and then I'm going to select by face groups. So I'm going to press L. I'm just going to keep pressing L, okay, until I get them all. Now, this should happen fairly quick. Sometimes when you select L, it'll accidentally select everything like this. And if that's your case, then you may have to manually go in and select where to trim. Example, I'm going to press C, and to do that, I pretty much would hold Control on my left click, and I'll just bring it in like that, and just go in from there and just start deselecting stuff to where I want to trim. In this case, I don't need to do that, so it's not something I want to do. So I'm going to select L again, just kind of. Or at this point, I can just select everything down here, and I'm going to hit X. I'm going to delete by faces, not vertices, faces. Okay. Now that that's done, I'm going to save it out and view it live. Export Neverwinter Nights II. Everything should still be the same. Patriot outfit. Here we go. And we're just going to click off of it, click back on it, and now we're floating. is not cool. We don't want to float. What we want to do is fix that now. Now, I already knew to do this beforehand. I'm showing you the steps. So to fix that float, what we're going to do is we can either duplicate the skeleton or we can just edit the skeleton as is. Meaning if we just move the skeleton in pose mode, take it to X-ray. Now if I just select these two and scale on the Z-axis and just pull it down, that works. Because even though you're moving the skeleton, you're not actually modifying the skeleton. You're not modifying the in-game skeleton. It's just, this right here does not matter, because what happens is the game pulls its own skeleton from the vanilla files. This always is just our reference. As long as it's tied down to a skeleton, it won't save like this. So if I export the MDB like this and I reopen it, this skeleton is going to be fixed. The mesh is the only thing that moved. The skeleton is going to go back to its default position like that. Just the mesh will be stretched. And if you want to see what that's like, just go ahead after you do this, just go ahead and reopen the mesh and you'll notice the skeleton's just like that, except that this mesh will be pulled down. Because you can't modify the skeleton itself. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I'm just pulled it down just a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and go to file. Well, I gotta commit that save first. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and apply it. I'm gonna apply that movement to the mesh. Okay, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and save file, export, Neverwinter Nights II, and the first one, body here. Go to female. Oops, you know what? That's my fault. Alright, so what I did wrong there is I didn't reapply a skeleton to the mesh. And when we don't do that, the game crashes. The game needs a skeleton applied to a mesh, or else it can't find one and it just crashes the entire game. So with that being said, I'm actually going to go back a little bit because I'm going to borrow the skeleton. I don't want to to go through explaining what I was about to explain right now with skeletons and how you pretty much reassign it, rest it, and bring it back in. In this case, what I'm simply going to do is I'm just going to do what I always do and just grab the skeleton here and go out of pose mode. I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to just use this skeleton as a marker for moving my mesh around and then deleting it. So I'm going to tie my mesh off to the new skeleton I just duplicated by going into mesh. I changed it to the new skeleton 01. Then I'm going to move that one around by scale on the Z. I'm going to move both. Scale on the Z. Bring it down just a bit. What was that? About right. Okay. So, and now that I've done that, I'm going to commit those changes to the mesh, and then I'm going to delete that duplicate skeleton and keep the one underneath still there. See? We didn't touch it. Still there. And I'm going to go to File, Export, and actually I'm going to make sure I reapply the skeleton, the original skeleton, back to the mesh. So File, Export, Neverwinter Nights II. One. Okay, now I gotta restart the game because I closed it out. And that's how you know this is live and raw, people. Or maybe I made that mistake on purpose, so I can teach that I didn't make that mistake on purpose. Alright, here we go. I am going to create a new character. He is going to be human. And I think I pulled it down just enough. You know, it has to come back a little bit. Easy fix. Simply Control Z, undo, 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 and just undo it enough to okay. Just gonna pull this back a little bit. I don't even have to hold control. I can just kind of press rotate and just get like, yeah, maybe we can see where we were originally by seeing the skeleton underneath. Maybe about that much, maybe a little more, right there. Okay, and let's go ahead and commit those changes to the mesh by applying it and deleting that skeleton. And now we've moved the mesh, but we still kept the skeleton intact, the original one underneath, that of which we reapplied to our mesh. And or else the game will crash, saying it doesn't have a skeleton applied to it. So basically, every time we make changes, we're duplicating the skeleton just to make the changes to the mesh, and then applying that change to the mesh, then deleting the skeleton, and then reassigning that mesh back to the original skeleton. Okay, hopefully that doesn't sound too confusing, and hopefully it makes sense. Export Neverwinter Nights II, and this. Now this shouldn't be taking long. I told myself I was gonna have this done in 30 minutes or less, but I feel like I'd be doing you an injustice by just saying, hey, figure it out from here on out. So now that we've done that, we can pull this outward too, one each a little bit. Now I don't want to do that because I really don't want to make this tutorial any longer than it has to be. You should be able to fix that. Well, I guess I can supply this model. I will supply this model in a blend file, so you may practice with it on your own. And I would challenge you to go ahead and try to fix that yourself and see if you can get that done. Okay, other than that, this model looks good to go. I also want to note that our sword, if we see how it moves in whole, it's because every time the pelvis, the hip moves, it moves as a whole. Whereas if the leg were to move forward, this part won't move forward with it and make it look like a weird banana sword. So there we go. There's our patriot. I'm not sure what setting this would fall into. It looks to be a royal. Maybe some would make use of it, some would not. I don't know. But that's it, everybody. Hopefully this tutorial was a little bit faster than the other. I apologize if I rambled on again. I tried to speak fast as I did in my first tutorials to try to get it done faster. But in the end, it's all about quality anyway. So hopefully this taught you a thing or two. If it didn't teach you how to do outfits, maybe it taught you to understand better how weights work, or how armatures work, or how one thing or another works. And you can apply it to your own works. Next tutorial, I'll be going and grabbing those boots, and I'll be making a boot tutorial, okay? All right, everybody, thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you all back soon.